Gather round, children. The Earth was destroyed by a great war. I was programmed to protect you. And now, we start again. Does anyone know the story of the three little pigs? The first little pig built a house out of straw. The second little pig built a house out of sticks. But the third little pig, he built a house out of stone. One day, a big bad wolf came along and said, little pig, let me in. Or I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in.
Bad wolf she was talking about?
Mother?
That's her.
Welcome to our second part of our coverage on Raised by Wolves. It's been a little while since we've covered the first 3 episodes, and in that episode, it was myself, Jamie Prater, and my co-hosts, Dan Fairlito and Patrick Green, and they stopped watching the show, and weren't as interested to finish, and I was very interested in finishing the show, and I had a lot to say about it, so I felt like it was time to come back around, and I bumped into an old partner of mine, Ryan Zaid, and I asked him, hey, would you like to do a part 2 of a Raised by Wolves coverage episode? And he was like, sure. So welcome, Ryan Zaid. Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be back. It's been a long time.
It has. And for those of you who don't know, Ryan was my partner on Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast. He was fundamental in starting with me and Patrick Shoulder of Orion, the Blade Runner podcast. The title comes from Ryan, so we pay royalties to him.
Darn right.
So thanks. We pay $300 a month. So thank you, Ryan, for coming on the show. It's great to be back with you and talk about this. I'm curious. Of course, yeah. I'm curious. When you heard about this show, what were your thoughts? Like, what were you thinking?
You know, I didn't know a whole lot about it. I remember seeing the trailer for it, and immediately I could tell that I knew it was a Ridley Scott production. I could tell immediately that it looked like it had strong ties to Prometheus and Alien Covenant. And I was really intrigued. I thought it might actually, narratively tie into those movies. But just visually and just the concept of it, it was very interesting to me. So yeah, I ended up, I was really looking forward to it and just to see where it went. And then saw the first couple episodes that were directed by Scott, and I thought it was, again, really interesting. I loved the 2 lead characters, mother and father, and yeah, it was just it was really fascinating. Just, again, beautiful to look at, really high production values that you would expect from a Scott-free production. So yeah, so those are my initial impressions of it for sure.
Now, did you watch it every week when they released, or did it take you a little bit longer to finish them?
No, actually, yeah, I watched them. I didn't always watch them like the day they were released, but I did watch, every week, pretty much as they came out, and it kind of went from really interesting to really bizarre pretty quick.
Yeah,
But
it did.
yeah,
So I had seen the first 3 episodes, like I was saying, with Pat. And we discussed them. I discussed them with Patrick and Dan.
right,
And then I think every week they were releasing 3 episodes.
yeah. Well, I think
or was it 2?
I don't know, maybe 1 or 2. I think it was
Okay.
2.
Okay.
Yeah.
What really stood out to you in terms of what was working?
Well, Amanda Collin was amazing. I think
Oh, yeah.
she's a great actress, and she, no matter what I thought of how the narrative was going, I thought she did a great job and really sold me on her character. And and it, besides that, Father too, although they kind of got away from what I liked about him, towards the end, or kind of in the middle and the end of the first season. And then again, the visuals were it was a great show to look at, just like Prometheus and Covenant. More Prometheus than Covenant, but they were both very uh, visually interesting and just aesthetically pleasing. But yeah, I guess that was kind of like the main things that stood out to me, in terms of what I thought was positive. So yeah,
I would agree with
yeah,
you about Amanda Collin. I think that she stole every scene that she was in, even
hmm,
though things seemed to be a little bit confusing as they went along and a little bit
right,
lack of coherence. I really felt like her performance was dynamic. It was really amazing. Um,
hmm,
and I don't, I, as the, I think the outset, as I approach, as I've been thinking about how to talk about this, because I don't want to turn this into this overtly critical thing, but I don't, in large part, I don't think that the show was successful
right,
narratively.
hmm,
And I do love the idea, like you have this idea of raised by wolves. What would it be like for AI to raise human children? How
hmm,
would those children turn out? And in my opinion, that never materialized. They never really
right,
explored that. You had
hmm,
Campion, who was the little boy that was successful, and there was some stuff going on with him, but he should have been a little bit more front and center. And I think
right,
let me say it this way: I was looking forward to seeing a show where AI, genderless, emotionless AI, was raising children. What kind of
hmm,
children does AI raise? Do they
right,
end up being sociopaths? Sociopaths? Do do some of the children uh, are they raised and their humanity blossoms because that's in our nature? That's what happens.
right,
What what is that like? And it would be. I thought it would be interesting because I think about, like, obviously there's biblical ideas happening in the show, and you think about the idea of Cain and Abel and Cain killing Abel and that very fundamental Bible story, and you could have
hmm,
a a setup where these kids are being raised and maybe one kid kills another kid. Um,
right, yeah,
and that's a product of being raised by droids that have no emotion, that maybe try and emote here and there,
hmm,
but they don't. And what would you do if, say, in the real world, you're raised by a mother who just didn't ever seem feeling, who never was
right,
very warm? How would that affect your life? And we probably know people like that in our. So I was really
hmm,
expecting and hoping the show to explore those things, but they didn't. It didn't, and it went off into these very grand atheism versus religion ideas, and it kind of I got really confused.
even that, that as you were talking about that, even the whole atheism versus religion thing never really materialized much for me either. It was just kind of this, it was sort of, it was this interesting subplot that they kind of initialized, and then they just kind of, I don't know, it's like they didn't go very deep with it. I think they more wanted to explore mother and these conflicting feelings in her and wanting to go to that pod and connect into that like virtual reality world, um and see, visions of her, her creator and things like that. And are we doing spoilers in this? I'm not sure, but people are
Yeah,
listening,
spoiler
okay,
alert. We're gonna
okay.
just talk about it. It's been
But
about, I think it's been at least a month since the last show came out. So
right, yeah. So, and she kind of falls for her creator and ends up, making love to him in the simulation, and then somehow getting impregnated. And they kind of seem to want to explore that more. And then and obviously the other storyline that I was a lot less interested in was the one with Marcus and his wife. And Marcus is slowly kind of losing his mind, and I just didn't think. Well, first of all, I just didn't think what's his name,
Travis
Travis
Fimmel.
Fimmel
Yeah.
did a very good job in that role, and it just wasn't. He didn't really sell it very well to me, and I but yeah, it's kind of like they started these branches of subplots and they just didn't kind of go with it. They weren't like secure and like, hey, let's just take this and really focus and devote, a couple episodes or something, really kind of write some, you know, very compelling dialogue and build the characters and kind of explore this narrative, more thoroughly. It just like they kind of just, I don't know, it just didn't go deep enough to me. It didn't go, it wasn't, just wasn't compelling. And they, again, and the way it ended, it was just like, oh, major like WTF, like what? And it was just, I kind of, ended the last episode, just, I was frustrated. I was like, man, there's so much potential in the show and so much they could have explored. And again, like you said, the genderless mother, genderless droid parents and how the kids would grow up. And there was just so many interesting ways they could have gone with the show. And I just felt like they just didn't commit to like really exploring stuff, and really getting down to the meat of it. It's just, yeah, it's more like they just threw ideas out and then they just kind of ended it with this really kind of ridiculous scenario. Um and it just sort of lost me there at the end. I mean, I'm still interested, and I will probably watch at least the first few episodes of season 2 because I do want to see if they how they roll with it, if they kind of course correct a little bit, or if something more interesting comes along or in the narrative. I'm interested to see, more of Amanda Collins' character and also a father and see it in their relationship and dynamic. But yeah, it's just skewed off in this bizarre direction for me. So yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think part of it for me was the main characters initially were mother and father, and I
Hmm.
had a they seemed to start bickering early on,
Right. Yeah.
disagreeing with maybe decisions that mother was making, and father seemed subservient to her, and that was odd to me that he was subservient. But aside from the subservience, I was like, why are these androids bickering? Why are they
Hmm.
looking at each other with suspicion? First of all, they shouldn't be talking with their mouths. Their
Mm.
their their technology should be Bluetooth syncing or whatever technology that they would be using
Mhm.
to speak. Those droids should be speaking without talking, of course, in a way that we, the audience, could understand. But
Mhm.
then as they went along, and I just saw them bickering, and one of them sort of betrays the other, I was like, these aren't droids; these are humans. There's nothing
Yeah.
droid-like about him. And then, like with Father, obviously, Father is male, played by an African
Mhm.
American man or an African British man.
Right.
Um, and I don't mean to be like specific, but obviously, you could tell, like with his suit, like he was obviously gendered male. He had like in that skin tight suit, you could see like their genital region or whatever. And I was kind of like, why
Yeah,
do
he
they
had a
have?
wang.
And I was curious, like, why does he have that? For what
Mm.
reason? What's he
Yeah.
doing with it? He wouldn't
Mhm.
need it. It's not like it just seemed, and it's one of those things I think, and I'm sure maybe everyone's like this to a certain degree. When something stops working in a show, every other things stop working as
Mhm.
well. For instance, there was a very interesting subplot happening of that guy with the helmet on his head who was a prisoner, and he had
Oh, yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
raped the
Mhm.
girls in
Right.
cryosleep,
Mhm.
and so he's introduced into the show. It's very intriguing. He seems intriguing and mysterious.
Mhm.
Uh, and then he gets killed, and you never see him unmasked. He's never
Yeah.
important. There was a moment where he starts sort of taking power from her. He starts feeding off Mother because she's having
Mhm.
like a drug, a blood transfusion or whatever. I don't know what's going on with them. Um,
Yeah. He
but then all of a
became
sudden
almost, like,
he's like,
superhuman.
yeah, it's like,
Yeah, it was
oh, I've
like
got her power, and I'm thinking, but she's a droid. What of her power?
yeah,
How would you get a droid's power? Like, how
I
would that
know.
make you Incredible Hulk? I just
Right.
didn't understand it. Um,
Yeah.
and then they crushed his head and they threw him down the hole.
Yeah.
And I was like, there was no payoff there. There was no point to this character. There was nothing even, and
Yeah.
that sense that you were talking about, like by the end, you're like, felt like it was lacking with that character. I was like, man, that could have been so potentially really interesting. It could have been a reveal for something. Maybe he didn't. Maybe these girls were impregnated by AI. Maybe, maybe
Mhm.
they're using him as a scapegoat. But none of that materialized, and he just was this throwaway character, and it was problematic for me.
Yeah.
It angered me that I could never see him, or not that I even couldn't just never see him. He just wasn't even important. Not he was not important at all to that film, um,
Right.
or to that show.
Yeah. Yeah, it just seemed very unfocused, the show. It's like they just kinda threw ideas out there and went with a little bit, and they're like, "Yeah, no, let's do this," or, like, he's trying to throw too much into even 10 episodes. It was, like,
Mhm.
too many threads, and it would have been better to cut down on some of the subplots and just really take the time to explore less things more thoroughly, more specifically.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I think that would have helped the show out. Even if I didn't like the direction they went with things, I would have appreciated it more if they were more confident and gave more respect to some of the storylines in it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it just yeah, if it's like a Jackson Pollock painting where you're just like throwing stuff up on the wall and trying to see like what works. I mean, it just I don't know, it just loses me. It's same as in it's harder to do in a 2-hour movie, but you can do that. And that's I think it's even worse in a movie.
Mhm.
Um, because you have less time and you're trying to throw all this stuff out on the screen, and it's just it just becomes it's easy to lose an audience that way. That's why I think it would have been more simple story. I think would have been better.
I would agree.
And
I would
yeah,
agree. One of my favorite moments or scenes in the show is when Mother is talking to that droid, like the doctor droid, and he's kind
yeah,
of hung up,
hmm
and she's there. He's learning about her, and he's teaching her about herself too. Like
hmm
he's explaining things. He kind of has a Shaw moment too, because he's like, I'm telling this to you because I was programmed to, or I
right,
believe this because I was programmed to. And I was like, well, that's a very Elizabeth Shaw thing to say. Elizabeth Shaw, for
right,
anyone who doesn't know, is the main character or one of the main characters from Prometheus.
hmm
And to your earlier point, there is a lot in common with Prometheus, whether it's a shot that they used from Prometheus. To the even the aesthetic design, and one of the problems I had, not problems, I think the show looks really good.
hmm
However, I don't think it looks much different than what Ridley Scott has been doing lately, because he's bringing the same crew over and over, and they're making the same choices for the visuals, where it's got that like contrasty metal feel. Like it's kind of
right,
these silver grays and these
hmm
black blacks, kind of monochromatic, and that's what a
hmm
lot of his work has looked like lately, and it's kind of
hmm
boring to me. And it,
oh
but not
yeah,
just boring. I've seen this before, and I felt like, well, this is what happens when you bring the same people over and over, and you're sort of this
hmm
production house. And I had wished the aesthetics of the show looked a little bit different. I wish it was a little warmer,
hmm
a little bit more aesthetically accessible, because you have the storyline or several storylines that don't seem that coherent or accessible, and the visuals aren't that accessible either. It's very
yeah,
monochromatic, silvery grays, and there's points when they're at their little hovel in the encampment, and it's more earth toned,
hmm
but still it's kind of monochromatic. But I was looking the entire time. I was looking for an entryway to connect, because that's what I do. I connect with characters, and I couldn't
hmm
find one. I just wasn't able to find one, and I was
yeah,
disappointed because I wanted to love it so much.
right, yeah, exactly, yeah, and going back to, I mean, it seemed like Scott and the production crew wanted to tie it as closely to like the feel and aesthetic of Prometheus and Covenant without, I guess, without getting sued. I mean, it was just like, it was so, uh, yeah, again, just brought the same kind of uh, sort of visuals over, same kind of feel, and it, yeah, it would have benefited, I think, from being a little bit more of a departure from that. I think, and yeah, and again, like you said, bringing over the same crew and probably talking about the, how we can kind of emulate parts of the Alien series in the show, even though, as I was talking before we recorded, Aaron Guzikowski, he had some quote, and I don't have it directly, but he basically said that, or he was asked, is this show, did you guys think about the Alien series or Prometheus at all while you were making it? And he responds with this very kind of, I don't know, naivete. It was just like, I don't think we ever really thought about it while we were making the show. And I was like, come on, man, are you serious? There's no way. Like, there's so many aesthetics, so many even plot points and imagery that was so close to the series, to the Alien series and the prequel films. And to me, it was like we were like teasing the audience, but at the same time, uh, oh no, but this is our own original thing. And I don't know, it was just, again, that was another thing that just didn't really pay off well. And I remember even in the last episode with the, with Mother's mouth burster and the lamprey coming out, and that whole sequence, I was just thinking, this is very similar to like the Shaw scene, when um even though there's no med pod, but there's like a lot of similarities to what happens to Mother and her reaction, and uh again, the thing with the helmet that looks like it's like a biomechanical helmet, and you open up the helmet, there's the head inside, and this, a being that kind of looks like an engineer at one point, um, maybe kind of like a primitive, sort of a smaller version, but still you can see the similarities there. And it was just, is like he wanted to bring in uh, people not only to work on the show, but bring an audience from his fans from his prequel movies and Alien, and like kind of like, oh, see, look at these kind of parallels. But it, to me, it just didn't go anywhere, and it was sort of a letdown. Again, I wish it was. I wish it was just something completely a complete departure. And then you get the white blood with the androids and things like that. It's just, you gotta be kidding if if they say, or you're like, I don't know, we didn't really think about the Alien series at all. We were making it, and I don't know. It was just it was another point of frustration for me to do that. Just they should have been more original with it. Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
agree. I mean, when I first saw, I mean, I had asked a friend of mine who worked on the show, is
Hmm.
there any parallels? And he's like, well, it's not directly connected to Alien. I said, so there is a connection? And he was like, oh, and he didn't say any more. And then, of
Oh,
course, I finally watched the show, and you see the elephantine um,
yeah.
helmet and then the engineer, and then and I'm thinking, like you, there's just no way. And okay, maybe there's not a narrative connection, but it's definitely a design connection. There's a
Hmm.
similarity between these designs, and I guess it was an android head inside this helmet. Where's that android from?
Hmm.
How old is this? We don't know any of these things. And
Yeah.
then the creature who actually, I think those four-legged creatures, those white creatures, they were de-evolving back into the original. Remember when they were talking about like, no, they're de-evolving, and I was like, what? Like,
Right. Yeah.
so there, I would think
So
if
it's like they used to be engineer like, and then now over thousands of years they've kind of de-evolved into these
four-legged monsters,
5 foot tall, four-legged yeah, it was just it's like they even took plot threads and like, well, let's reverse it or let's like twist it a little bit, like what you did in Prometheus or Covenant, and I don't know, but um, yeah, it was just like I again another point of frustration just thinking about it, like just yeah,
yeah. Our
yeah,
friend Mitch Mitchell, because when I was
hmm
talking about it on Facebook or somewhere, saying, "Hey, I think there's a connection here between Alien," and of course I had other people saying, "No, there's no connection. There's no connection at all. There's none. There's none. There's none." And then
hmm
again, talking to my friend who was like, "Well, I mean, I knew obviously that there was some type of connection," and I
right,
said, and he said, if there's no connection, they were just lazy with the design.
oh yeah,
Um, and I think that was kind of the contention that I had. Like, if these shows or films or universes aren't connected, then why do these things look so similar to things that we've seen before? Why aren't they
hmm
their own mythology? Why do they look so similar to things we've seen before? Why is their blood white? Why is that helmet look like uh, an engineer helmet? Why does that
hmm
creature look like a primitive engineer? It even had the ridge and the nose
hmm
and like that David kind of
right,
quality. And he was
hmm
white. Like, why do these look so similar to things that we've seen before? Um, that's confusing. And knowing that people who follow
hmm
Ridley Scott like we do, we love his work. We're going to see what he
hmm
does. We're going to be interested in this, and that's a big question I have. And I don't even think the inclusion of those design choices are bad.
right,
I just think that they're kind of like a head scratcher. Like, why'd you do this? Well, for what
hmm
reason? Because it makes you think and it makes you go off into this other direction. But and the problem also is there's so much going on in the show, and I think um, I would for me, mother's pregnancy was problematic because
hmm
I guessed she was going to get pregnant. I just knew. I just knew. I
okay,
just felt
yeah,
like this. Something's like. They can't resist mother getting pregnant,
hmm
and then her first reaction was like, "I don't want it," And I'm thinking,
hmm
wait a minute, you just tried to raise 6 children. Of course you
hmm
want this. So
hmm
it didn't really make sense to me that she didn't want the pregnancy, and then finally when she mouth bursts the lamprey or eel or whatever that thing is, I was like, what in the Sam hell is this show even about? And then it glides off in the forest. And I
right, yeah,
I just felt like it became campy
hmm
garbage at that point. Like, really well made. I don't want to call the whole show garbage. It's not my intent to sit
right,
here and overly bash it. But I was laughing by that point. Um
yeah,
I do think the mouth bursting was intense, though. It was intense what
hmm
she was going through, and I was curious what she was going to have. I wrote a novella a few years back about an android having a human child, and I thought, well,
for
this
that,
would
yeah,
be interesting if she has this like hybrid android human baby or whatever. And of course, they didn't do that, which I was kind of relieved at because that was my idea. No, no, I'm sure it wasn't. Um,
I was well, yeah. Just an aside, that was another thing that bothered me because I felt the whole android getting pregnant thing. I mean, it's like, dude, you guys just took that from Blade Runner 2049, another really Scott production. Like, and they did it way better in that movie than the show. And it was just another like lazy writing to me. And again, even you predicted this pregnancy thing was going to happen. I'm sure a lot of people did, and because to me, it's just not original. It's not. It's taking ideas um, and just again more stuff thrown on the wall that they just didn't really explore very well. And yeah, so
yeah, and to rewind from that, I think when she's having her, I don't know if they're visions or she's in memories of Campion, the creator or whatever he is. I'm not really sure. And then she ends
oh
up
right,
having sex with him, and this really interesting visual actually of them having sex and they're floating. But I also
hmm
felt like, why did you do this? Why did you need to include a sex scene with this? Why did you need to include a sex scene with this female android? Why couldn't you have
Mhm.
left that alone? The show didn't need it. It didn't need that. And I felt like it was kind of a little bit predictable, like, oh look, he's having sex with the girl android that he made. And I love the idea of a necromancer and that she was very powerful. I really did.
Mhm.
Like, I thought that was great, but they didn't really explore that too much.
Right.
Um and I guess, like, why were they made? What were they? I mean, I know that they were on Earth and they were made by the the what were the religious people called? The Mithraics?
Mithraic? Yeah,
Yeah, so those
Mithraics.
they were made by the Mithraics to fight the atheists for whatever reason, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think it's right, yeah.
and so I thought, okay, that was interesting, but why would the Mithraics make these droids female um, presenting? For what reason?
Right.
Why would they
Mhm.
create breasts and this body? For what
Mhm.
reason? There would be no plausible reason that you would make killer androids that look like women. Um,
Right.
it was just
Mhm.
a strange aesthetic choice to me.
Mhm.
And then, of course, I think it's interesting. I think it would have been more interesting if, again, if these droids were genderless, but she is called into sentient. Sen-
Mhm.
sentient? Sent- to be sentient is to be sort of conscious. So she's
Right.
called into consciousness and her own awareness as the show goes on. Before, she's just sort of this droid that does whatever, and she's all programming and all coding and all that. But then she's reprogrammed. She's reprogrammed to save humanity, and I think that's a very interesting idea, to go off to another planet and save humanity. Um, but I thought it would be interesting if her journey to consciousness, to her own consciousness, and her own sense of who it is as a droid would have been explored, but they didn't. She was just this girl droid, this woman droid, I should say, and there
Mhm.
didn't seem to be any reason that she was female. I want to know
Right.
why she was female, why they felt like they
Mhm.
needed to make these, and maybe it's because the kids needed this father figure, this mother figure. Um, but if they're droids, who cares? Like, there's just a lot of questions that I have, and it's not like, oh, I'm excited to see it in the next season because I probably won't watch next season. It was just kind of like, this is not working for me. What is this? And then there's the minutia, like, um, there are these really high powered androids who can't seem to find runaway kids. They don't have like
Right.
heat signals that they can see where these heat signals
Or
are.
X-ray vision type of thing,
Yeah,
yeah.
or something.
Yeah.
Or mother can't, like, when she's flying, find these kids. She flies up, she has a hard time, and then the kids are being poisoned for a long time because of the
Mhm.
food. But mother and all her technology can't understand that. She can't tell that the food that they're eating is radioactive, so it's killing them over time. Like,
Right.
that would should be a fundamental, if you're going to design a robot or a droid to nurture humanity on another planet, she's going to be
Mhm.
able to do a lot of things, which includes making sure the food's okay. A fundamental, elemental thing.
Right.
And she didn't know. And that seemed problematic to me as well.
Yeah, it's like for plot convenience, they omitted stuff or they said, "What do we do about this?" "Oh, we'll just make it so, they don't know that this thing is going on." And, I would think in the writing room, it'd be like, "Well, how would she not know? She's this uber powerful android," and it's like, don't worry about it. They'll go with it." I don't know. I don't know exactly how they would uh, explain that away, but it's kind of stuff that it's the kind of stuff that bothered me in Prometheus and Covenant. Like those, they would throw stuff in there and like, well, and a lot of questionable things. Like, well, why do they do that, or why don't they know this or that? And it's just like, uh, we just have to roll with it, or it's what Ridley wants or something. And I just, uh, it just makes me wonder. Maybe if there's stuff left on the cutting room floor that might have been interesting, or if it's just, again, just a frustratingly unfocused and just uh, yeah, just a storyline that was not too many storylines and things that just weren't explored very well.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, and I would say the last. I mean, obviously there are quite a few things in there that I could talk about, and
Hmm.
ultimately I was disappointed because I always want to love everything, and certainly if
Hmm.
Ridley Scott is back in science fiction, I want to see it. This is
Hmm.
the ostensible father of sci-fi, and I had seen the trailers, I'd seen the visuals, I was like, oh hell yeah, this looks good.
Yeah.
um, and it wasn't, and I always want to love everything, and of course it's not always possible. My last, I would say, comment I think on Mother and her sort of technology is the eyes. She had to keep removing
Hmm.
her like her killer eyes. And I'm thinking, she's this high powered droid. She should be able to move within, turn those off, or like she shouldn't have to take out her eyes
Hmm.
and put in new eyes. I didn't understand that too much. Like she
Yeah.
she could kill with the eyes, but and you can't look at her if she has those eyes in because she'll kill you. It was just kind of all over the place for me, and it just wasn't working. And I just felt
Hmm.
like if you're going to design whoever, however much those necromancer droids cost to design, let's say they cost $10 million each. I don't know.
Yeah.
You would imagine that they're going to be able to turn on and turn off their weaponry without
Right.
having to actually physically pull their eyes out. It just
Hmm.
seemed it seemed, and I think I'm missing something here with that. There was a reason why that was happening, and I can't remember for sure. But whatever the reason, it just didn't make sense to me.
Yeah, exactly. And I can't, I'm trying to think through the episodes if there was any explanation for that. Maybe there was some one-off sentence like why they needed to do that. But again, I mean, it, I don't know. Again, it just is all over the place, is convoluted, and I just not that they needed like a present real world example for it, but I just can't think of any technology where like, yeah, this is a computer. If you leave this thing in, it'll be more powerful. But if you take it out and put this in, it'll be less powerful. And like, well, why would you want to do that?
Hmm.
Just keep it more powerful.
Hmm.
Well, just go with it, man. Do you want to buy it or not? I don't know. It's just like,
Yeah, yeah.
to me, it's just another strange plot point. I think maybe they wanted to do that to because maybe they felt she was overpowered, like she was too, which can be a problem when you're like trying to write Superman too. Like you can make him too powerful,
Hmm.
so you have to
Hmm.
find ways to kind of weaken him a little bit,
Hmm.
like kryptonite and things like that. So maybe for that it was just, well, she keeps her eyes in, her more powerful eyes in the whole time, then no one's going to stop her. I mean, she's going to just destroy everything and everyone. And so we have to come up with some way. And I just thought the different eyes was probably not the best way to do it. Um, maybe there instead some way to reprogram her, or um, some kind of weapon or something that can weaken her. I don't know, but something different I think would have worked better. I
Hmm.
just the eyes thing, and that one part of the episode where Campion like steals the eyes, and I forgot if he buried him or was going to destroy him, and father got upset and, and found him. I don't know, but it didn't really go anywhere. It was just kind of um, just part of an episode that was
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
supposed to ramp up tension, and it didn't do anything.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
Um, I don't know if I have that much more to say on this. And I was on my end. I was thinking, like in terms of like my sort of final words. Unless, do you have anything else that you wanted to touch upon?
Well, given everything that we've talked about and me thinking over it, I do still want to give the series a chance and see where they go with season two. And again, I definitely talked about. It feels like I talked more negatively about it in this episode, but there were some redeeming. I've talked about some of the redeeming qualities of it, and again, I think Amanda Collin, and I don't think I gave enough credit to. I think Abu Bakar Salimi was father. He was great. They're both. I really want to see that dynamic and see how it develops more in season two, and I'm hoping season two is just there's less going on. I'm not. I should say it's more simple, more streamlined. They have a more focused story, and maybe just some better dialogue, and um, yeah, kind of exploration of what's going on, and but I don't know that flying lamprey thing at the end just was like almost like a jumping the shark moment for
Hmm.
me, just like um just disappointing.
Hmm.
And but again, it's I don't know, it's be interesting to get other people's take on it. But I feel a lot of people feel similar ways that we do about it. And uh but just again, just like Prometheus, maybe a little less so with Covenant, but I have super high expectations, and it just started off meeting those expectations, even if maybe even exceeding it a little bit, and then just kind of dropping off the cliff.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
yeah, we'll
Yeah,
see.
I would say for me, I think my question at the end was I don't really know what the show's about. Um,
Right.
it was
Yeah.
called Raised by Wolves, and the premise was androids raising children. That's really
Hmm.
not what the show is about. And at the end of episode 10, I was like, I was just confused as to what the show was about. And you had the whole Mithraics versus atheism, and then Travis Fimmell's character, who was an atheist, sort of believing in soul, which is the god, but there
Hmm.
was no like exploration as to what's going on there, what's making
Hmm.
him crazy. There was nothing. There was nothing given to us. There was a lot of questions, but they weren't even very interesting questions. They were just questions like, okay, we found this structure. What is the structure? We don't know. And then they
Hmm.
find the elephantine mask with the we like all of these things are just piling up like oh now there's a lamprey like there's no explanation to anything that we're given. It's all just kind of thrown out there and nothing's really working. So at the end of the show, I was scratching my head like, I don't know what that show's about. And it's certainly not Raised by Wolves. It's certainly not the premise that they put forward. And
Right.
so if I were to say rate it between on a 5 star, like between 1 and 5 stars, I would probably give it a 2. Um,
Right. Yeah.
Production design is great. Acting is, except for Campy and the little boy,
Hmm.
is top notch. Amanda Collin is almost worth it just to see
Hmm.
her perform. She's going to be a
Yeah.
star. She reminds me a little bit of Love from,
New. Oh yeah. Yeah.
and Numi
Uh.
too for sure.
Yeah.
Sylvia
Hmm.
Hoeks, I think that's her name.
Oh
There's a
right. Yeah.
similar quality to them. They're both very like gripping and intense droids. Well,
Hmm.
Love isn't a droid, but she's this manufactured thing. There's some
Hmm.
similarities there.
Hmm.
Um, I wish I could give it higher rating. I wish I could love it more than I do because I don't love it at all, and I probably won't. I won't watch season 2. However, what I'll do is if someone like, hey, no, Jamie, you should watch this. It gets really
Hmm.
interesting. Then I'll watch it. But for now, I'm not recommending it.
Right. Yeah. I again, yeah, from or I would follow right along with you. I'd probably give it somewhere right in the middle, 5 out of 10 or something like that. And yeah, it just needs right. We just don't know. It's hard to say what the show's about. It's unfocused, and it's just it needs a little bit more care, and I think a little bit more thought as they I don't even know if they've started pre-production on season two or whatever, but I think they need to kind of take a step back and say, okay, I think this first season we tried to do too many things, and we kind of got away from maybe where we really wanted initially to go with the show. And maybe with this season we need to kind of scale things back a little bit,
Hmm.
and focus more on the characters, and um, developing those relationships, and um, yeah. So I don't know. Well, we'll see what happens. I'll be watching it, and I'll let you know if I
Oh, for
think you
sure.
should
Okay.
watch it.
Thanks. I mean, and in this COVID world that we're living in, I'm not sure when they're going to start production on season 2. But I would agree with you. I think that they need to simplify. I think they need to work more on those scripts. I think the
Hmm.
dialogue and the characters need to actually be believable because they're not, and that's something
Hmm.
Ridley Scott struggles with a lot in his work of late of the last few years is um, coherent and believable scripts and characters.
Hmm.
And it doesn't matter what ideas you present. It doesn't matter how good it looks. If those fundamental things aren't working, you don't have a show. You don't have a film.
Hmm.
And in my
Right.
opinion, right now, it isn't. It is not working.
Right.
Although the show got really good reviews from a lot of critics, rave
Hmm.
reviews, and so it is working for quite a few people. So
Hmm.
definitely, if it interests you, certainly watch it. Like I don't want people to be like, "Oh, don't waste your time." I do feel like on my own for my own part, I'm like, I could have seen other things during that time, but
Right.
it's in the
Yeah.
world and it's available, and you know, um, everyone's at home, so go ahead and watch it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just looking at the IMDb ratings right now, and I'm looking at the episode ratings, and they start off really high. I mean, they're like 8.6,
Oh
eight point
wow.
three, and then you get to the middle one, like 8.0, and then it drops like the last three, 7.4, 7.7, and then the very last one's a 6.2.
Oh shit.
And,
Wow.
and again, those are, subjective fan ratings and, um, but uh, not professional critics, but still, I'm sure they all have similar views and similar problems with the way the show went and kind of fell off the cliff a little bit. So it's, yeah, but I'm hoping that it goes in the right direction. I don't know what that direction is going to be. I'm just really hoping for good things for season two because I know Aaron Guzikowski. I mean, he said he already had this whole thing, like 6 season thing, planned out. And like, man, if you don't course correct big time, you're not even going to get past season two. If I mean, it's gonna get canceled, I think.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
you're gonna maybe they got a ton of I don't know what the how many viewership is, but I that's really how those things keep going, and you're going to lose viewers if you keep I think if they just keep going in the same direction and keep throwing stuff up that doesn't work.
Yeah.
So
I think lastly I'll say is I think there's an interesting dynamic happening where the showrunner Aaron, what's his last name? Guzikowski.
Guzikowski, yeah.
Okay. He was working on the show before Ridley Scott showed up.
Hmm.
So then Ridley Scott showed up, came on as an executive producer and a director. And I feel like I think the show would have been very different if Guzikowski himself would have done it on his own. I think what happened was Ridley Scott sort of took over. His people
Hmm.
came in, his designers, his art
His
directors.
entourage,
Yeah,
yeah.
total entourage. The people who kind of shovel out films for him, year
Hmm.
after year. And I think the show changed fundamentally. I think that there was a lot in Raised by Wolves that might not have been in there if Ridley Scott
Hmm.
wouldn't have been aboard. And I'm not saying
Yeah.
it's just, oh, he shouldn't have been involved, but I think there's a dueling sense of direction going on. I
Hmm.
would love to know, and I don't know if we'll ever know. I don't know if scruples or ethics would ever keep him from saying, well, this is the show I had intended. I didn't make the show that I intended.
Right.
Maybe it is a show he intended. But there's
Possibly,
certainly a
yeah.
coherence problem there for sure.
Yeah.
It is, in my opinion, completely incoherent. Um,
And
so we,
he wrote Prisoners too, the
yes,
Denis Villeneuve movie,
which
which
is
is a
great.
phenomenal movie.
Yes, yes.
And that I mean that from beginning to end, that movie had me on the edge of my seat.
Yeah,
I was really hoping for something like that with Raised by Wolves, and
yeah. We
yeah,
didn't get it.
right.
Well, I think that's it for us today. Thank you, Ryan, for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
And thanks everyone for listening. And I'm sure we'll be back again with another like kind of this is like a we're taking a break with our formal shows right now, so I decided to catch up on some things. There's going to be interviews coming out, but we will talk to you guys again. Thank you so much, and catch Ryan on Xenomorphing. They have
Hmm.
xenomorphing.com, and they have a Facebook page, and they have
Hmm.
Hive Mind, which is their own podcast.
Yeah.
So check them
Hmm.
out there.
Yeah, we bash Perfect Organism all the time. On it, so I'm just kidding.
Imperfect organism.
Yeah, right.
That's true. All right, thanks, Ryan.
All right, thanks, guys. Thank you.
For more on Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast, please visit perfectorganism.com. Perfect Organism is available for listen or download through Podbean, iTunes, Google Play, TuneIn, and Spotify. If you'd like to support the show, please visit perfectorganism.com/support. Thank you.